The movie begins as we see a former North prisoner called into the stage. This man managed to successfully escape from North Korea to South Korea. The man is being called out so he can share his experience to the world on how he and his people suffered as citizens of North Korea. Since North Korea is a dictatorial country, nobody outside the nation has much information about it. The man gladly begins his story far back in 1995 in North Korea. He tells a story about a 9-year-old kid known as Johan. He stays at Pyongyang in North Korea, where he lives with both his father, mother, and his little sister. They recently relocated from Japan to North Korea. The North Korean leader at that time was called Kim Il-sung, whom everyone looked up to like a god that should be praised and worshipped. While Johan was returning from school one day, he spots 2 men on uniform spying on his movements and his house activities. Immediately after dinner at his house, Johan uses the opportunity to inform his father on those men he saw on uniform in their apartment recently. According to his dad's reaction, it turns out that it wasn't the first time those men were spying on them. His father knew that those men are from the North Korean authorities, who has been suspicious of their origin. Instantly, he tells his son Johan to work really hard and be strong enough to protect the family no matter what. Johan's father quickly invites all his relatives later that night, and they started to make plans on buying documents so they can escape from the country or might fall victim of the brutality and hardships of North Korea. The next day, we find out that Johan's father is missing, as we see his mom making calls on her husband's whereabouts, since he secretly went to buy documents for their family escape and hasn't returned yet. Johan notices his mom's depression and asks her what's wrong. Instantly, she pretends like everything is fine, and lies to him that everything is okay. Later that night, while everyone was asleep, they hear a bang on the door. And as Johan's mother goes to check, it turns out that it's the North Korean security officers at their apartment, who angrily informs Johan's mother that her husband has been arrested for committing a very serious political offense. Immediately, the officer instructs his men to search the whole house. Johan's mother was really so afraid, and even tried to bribe the officer in charge with her husband's expensive watch so she can reason with him. But instead, the officers forces them to pack their loads and place them inside their truck to be transported to an unknown location. Here we see few other North Korea citizens with their loads inside the truck. Immediately, the truck drove off. After 2 days of no food and water, they finally arrived at the location the officers were taking them to. This location is revealed to them all, as Johan, his mother, and his sister have been taken to a notorious cruel political prison of North Korea. The prison is just like a small city, which is filled up with hungry people, as we see the prisoners fighting for scraps of food in order to survive. By the look of things, all the prisoners were treated like animals, and some are just randomly killed like flies, just for no reason. Johan, his sister, and his mother were given a place to stay. The floor is dirty, the windows are small, and the whole place is filled up with spider webs. But they have no choice but to live as they are told so that they can stay alive. The next day, we see Johan and the rest of his family already being forced into hard labor along with the other prisoners. This was a very devastating moment, as age wasn't a concern to these North Korea officers, as both the children, women, and the elderly were imposed with hard labor. After working from morning to night without rest, they were given a very little amount of food. Later that night, all the prisoners are being called out, and they are promised to be given extra food in return if they snitch on each other. Out of desperation for food, we see the prisoners snitching on each other, and they were given a tiny amount of food in exchange for their information. One of the prisoners reported about how he saw his fellow prisoner saying the sign of the cross. This was a huge crime, because no one is meant to worship any god, if not for their leader Kim Il-sung. And for her punishment for praying, she is to be executed. As the old woman begs for her life, she was taken to the control zone, a place where the prisoners are usually tortured to death for any crime they commit. The next day, the sons of the North Korean security officers were patrolling around. They despise Johan so much because he's from Japan. So to satisfy their hate, they instructed him to bow down and grunt like a pig. Johan couldn't do what they asked him to do, until one of the prison supervisors smacked him on the head and forced him to do so. Johan returns back home very depressed, and angrily blames his dad for the situation they are into. His mom angrily hits him for the bad things he said about his dad, and explains to him that his father only wanted to save their family by helping them to escape from the country. But unfortunately, he was caught. One day a public punishment was carried out by the security officers. These 4 fugitives tied on a tree tried to escape from prison. And as a punishment for that, they were to be killed in front of everyone. to use it as a lesson for anyone that tries to escape. The painful part was as we see a little boy's mother, who was among the fugitives that was tied down in the tree. And as everyone are forced to watch, the officers points their gun at them and killed them instantly. This little boy is called Insu. After his mother was killed by the officers, he became an orphan. Johan's mother, out of pity, decided to warmly welcome him and treat him like a family. Insu is a kind kid, and due to the loss of his both parents, he started to stammer whenever he speaks. Johan and the children were later forced into mining. During the struggle, the child was found sick by the security officers. Immediately, the security officers, instead of helping her out, decided to throw the kid inside a pile area full of dead bodies, as they regard sick prisoners as unwanted items that should be disposed. Johan and Insu started to bond together, and they became best friends. Their instinct for survival grew more bigger, and Insu and Johan started to grunt like a pig to impress the security officers' children so they can get extra food in return. 9 years later, Johan, Insu, and his little sister are all grown up. Winter has arrived, and the food in the camp started to get small enough not to even fill a child's belly. Seeing all these, Johan decided to make a really hard decision by starting to snitch on his fellow prisoners so he can get food back in return. He does this a lot of times, and the prison guards became fond of him because of this and recruited him as a prison guard. Johan started to adopt the attitude of the strong surviving and the weak meant to die. The guards became impressed with Johan and promoted him into a supervisor, as he totally turned into a ruthless human, depending on the situation in the camp. Johan's mother became so disappointed and ashamed of him because of this, and doesn't even accept the foods he brings to her because she already knows the dirty things he did to get those food. One day, a prisoner decided to take a revenge on Johan by stabbing his mother, so she can take her revenge on what Johan did to her husband. Few days later, Johan's mother passed away due to the severe injury she sustained from the stab. The death of his mother made him to find his humanity again, and he started to see the reward of showing love and care to the other prisoners. In the meantime, he and the other prisoners started to care and watch each other backs. We later see Johan's sister, Insu, showing a romantic interest towards each other. But unfortunately, there was another officer who was showing interest in Johan's sister, but in a sexual way. One day, when Johan's sister was getting some water from the stream, the security guard that showed romantic interest in her apprehended her and ended up raping her. Insu gets really outraged by this and couldn't take the abuse anymore and went after the guard that raped her. But this was a wrong move, because the security officer had something which Insu doesn't have, which is power. For his attempt to harm one of the security officers, Insu was tied up upside down and was tortured for weeks. Fortunately, Insu managed to survive the brutal torture and is taken back to the camp. Immediately, Johan comes up with a plan with Insu to have his sister and the two of them escape from the prison. The plan was all about hiding in an unknown container under a minecraft. They concluded to escape on the Day of the Sun, which was an annual public holiday in North Korea, as the whole North Koreans, as well as the prisoners, will be celebrating their great leader birthday, Kim Il-sung. While all the prisoners was assembled in the hall, Johan causes a distraction by reporting to the North Korean generals that he saw the prison guards watching South Korea medias. This causes a fight between the officers, while Insu and Johan's sister uses the opportunity Johan gave them to escape. Insu and Johan's sister were suddenly caught by that same guard who raped her. But feeling guilty for what he has done to Johan's sister, he decided to let them escape. The scene then changes back to the present, at the TED Talk show, as it is revealed that the speaker saying the story turned out to be Insu. He concluded his story, saying that Johan didn't plan to escape with them from the beginning, as the container could only contain 2 persons. Insu begged the entire South Korea listening to him to take action, as these sufferings the North Korean citizens are going through are still happening till this very day. Immediately after his story, he is applauded by everyone. The scene then changes back to the North Korean prison camp in the present day, as we see Johan is still alive, and he is still watching the back of the other prisoners. And that was how the movie ended. Thank you for watching, guys. If you love animation movies, please subscribe to this channel and keep watching. Bye.